Disclaimer. The 24 Shades of Blue Cold Case Edition series is about real ongoing homicide investigations. The following conversation may be disturbing to some people and is not recommended for all ages. Please take a moment and decide if you would like to continue listening or watching. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey everybody, welcome to 24 Shades of Blue Cold Case Edition. I'm your host for the series, Andy O'Brien. Today's cold case, we're going to be looking into the case of Christine Prince. And today I have with me again, Toronto Homicide's lead detective, Steve Smith. How you doing, Steve?
Good. How you doing, Andy?
Good. Thanks for being with us. I think the first question here is, who was Christine and what were the last moments of her life like, in your opinion?
Christine was a 25-year-old nanny from Wales. She'd come over to Canada to work, make a little bit of extra money, whether she's going to go back to university after she made a little bit of money over the course of the summer. She was here. She had a boyfriend that was here as well, and she had a couple of friends that were also Welsh nannies in the area. On this fateful night in 1982, June 22nd, 1982, Christine was downtown near Yonge and Bloor with her friends. They were out at a coffee shop. They went to see a movie. They boarded public transit and headed back towards where Christine was living out on Pinewood Avenue in sort of central downtown Toronto. And she emerged from a streetcar, and that's the last time anyone had ever seen her.
So she was essentially just taken off the street, vanished.
Yeah, our belief is it was raining a little bit that night, and she had an umbrella with her. Her umbrella was found in the middle of the street about halfway up Pinewood Avenue. We believe that the perpetrator or perpetrators were waiting in a vehicle, and they may have called her over. Her being a good person went over to give them directions or whatever they were asking, and she was taken right from the street there.
Just so we can kind of paint the picture here, if her umbrella was found in the middle of the street, if one were to pick somebody up off of the sidewalk, very rarely would that. If someone comes and grabs me, I'm not going to drop my umbrella as I'm being taken off the street. So more than likely, it sounds like they may have called her over.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
She was trying to give directions or what
That's
have
right.
you.
She came from the far sidewalk, walked across the street to meet at the vehicle. And when they grabbed her, she dropped her umbrella. Again, if she had went willingly with them, she would have taken her umbrella with her. So we believe that she was taken right from that street.
And so I guess we know what happened initially to get her in the vehicle. Do we have any description of the vehicle? Was it a van,
Unfortunately,
car?
we don't. We don't have any description of the vehicle or the perpetrators at this time. All we have is a DNA profile, male DNA profile.
We know that if she was scooped from the street, that chances are, as we were talking about before the show, chances are this person's not driving, abducting, and, getting an individual into the, trunk or, back seat of the car. So you believe strongly there was more than one individual involved?
I would think so. I mean, as you said, it would be very difficult to overpower someone and drive while you're trying to overpower someone. It makes more sense if there was a second person and they may have been holding her down at the time while a secondary person was driving.
Okay, so then in that case, you would think that if someone was giving directions, this also could have had a third or fourth person involved. This could have had a sliding door from a van. We're talking back in, let's talk about the date. We're talking back in 1982. So we know what time. It was late in the evening. You were saying, I think around 1:30.
Yeah, it would have been around 1:30 in the morning at the time.
So this could have been multiple perpetrators. Basically, so they pick her up, they take her off the street, and then let's talk about where this led after.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we don't know what happens in the meantime, but we do know that her body was found up in the Rouge River up off Meadowvale Avenue in the north end, up by the Toronto Zoo. They didn't take any precautions to hide the body. She was basically just dumped in the river up there, and she was found by passersby in the morning. So
we know from these pictures here, for our viewers that have access via video, we know that she was taken essentially and thrown into the Rouge River. When we look at the pictures here, as we discussed before the show, this wasn't individuals who had scored too high on the IQ test. One being this wasn't planned very well. She was put into water that we can see here. The rocks are maybe knee high, if that. So do you feel was she dumped off a bridge? Is it unknown? Was she carried down through the ravine? What's your gut telling you on this one?
Either or. I mean, she could have been thrown off the bridge, or they could have driven down and backed up and threw her body out. Again, it lends itself to what happened. We know she was sexually assaulted, so we believe she was alive for a period of time. We just don't know, did they drive her up there, sexually assault her, and then kill her up there? Did they take her to a secondary address, sexually assault her, kill her there? Did they drive her up to that area and were going to release her? She fought, they killed her and panicked and dumped her in the river. We just don't know those answers.
Because it's a lot to think. I mean, taking somebody from the west side of the city, driving somebody all the way over to well over in the east side by the Toronto Zoo, one would think that there's a reason for that outside of the Rouge River being their ideal place to dump a body, because the water's too low here. You know that this body is going to be seen by somebody relatively soon, especially it's trafficked area, right? Runners and people walking with their dogs back there. It's not a place you would look to really conceal a body. The other thing I think is, so maybe this was the place close to potentially where they may have assaulted her.
Yeah,
maybe they
absolutely.
had a place.
I mean, they obviously had knowledge of this area as well as the downtown area of Toronto.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just wanted a secluded area, there's tons of areas closer than that to drive to.
Yeah.
But we also do know that they came back westbound on the 401 after dumping Christine's body, because they threw her wallet out with her ID in it. It was found by a road worker on the side of the road just east of Morningside. Just west of Morningside on the 401. So we know that they came back westbound on the 401 as well.
And then they could have went back into the downtown core. Maybe one of the perpetrators lived downtown.
Absolutely.
Had you to believe.
Yeah. Who knows what it was, right? But I mean, to sexually assault a young woman, murder her, and then still have I don't even know what you would call it, to rob her of her belongings. I mean,
or lack of.
That's right.
Something.
Yeah. Well, what type of people are we talking?
Yeah. And I mean, brings you back to, what we've been talking about. What is the motive here? I mean, is the motive a sexual assault? Is the motive a robbery? Are these sadistic killers looking to murder people? One would believe that the driving force is always sexual assault, typically in these cases. Am I wrong in assuming that for the most part? That's what drives them the most?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the 80s, the sexual assault of random women on the street was a lot more prevalent because of the lack of tracking, the lack of video evidence, the lack of DNA, than it is today, where, a perpetrator's found a lot quicker, a lot easier. You're able to gain evidence through video, through DNA, that sort of thing.
We were talking about this too. I mean, we're looking to bring some closure to the families. We're looking to catch these people. What are we talking age-wise? I mean, I'm 39 in 82. I was born in 81. So these individuals, if they committed this, 20, 30, I mean, they're well on in life. Where do you think these people are now? And how old do you think these people are?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking minimum in their 50s. Could be up to, any age. They could be deceased. We just don't know, but we want to find out who did this. We want to find out who the offender was, and we want to bring justice to Christine's family.
And DNA evidence, we know there was DNA collected off the victim, off Christine. What do we know about the DNA?
So all we know right now is it's male DNA. We're looking to use new scientific techniques to further test. Unfortunately, the DNA at this point isn't good enough for further testing, but we're looking to enhance that DNA to be able to do biographic testing, and then hopefully go ahead with genetic genealogy as well. It's just a matter of, every 6 months science is improving, and we're getting very close to being able to utilize the amount and the quality of the DNA that we have. We're very, very close. We just need to push it across the line.
So if we can get a name, that would be a huge help breakthrough in the case potentially.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we still have enough, and we've been able to develop a male profile off it, so we can do direct one-to-one testing. So if we get a name, we can test and say for sure whether he's the offender or not.
So what was the area like around, the time of Christine's death?
This is an affluent area. I mean, it was all professionals. It was, nice houses. Things like this just didn't happen. People just getting snatched off the street. It's something out of the movies.
Yeah.
She's just walking home. She's going to go look after kids in the morning, right? So she's just going to go home, grab a few hours sleep, get up and help the family out and look after their children and stuff. And in the meantime, these guys, they do this to her. It's unbelievable, unconscionable.
And, the area. So we know about, I think the Rouge Bridge area. Let's talk about, is this a place, people have went missing? Is this a place people are murdered? Tell me a little bit about that, the murder scene in the area there.
Yeah, I mean, any secluded area can be used for any sort of nefarious means, right? What their connection to this area was, unfortunately, we don't know. But they must have known of this area, this specific area. It's not a place, especially with all the stops in between, that you would just drive until you found. You obviously they had some connection to this area, whether they had perpetrated these offenses before, whether they had, whether this is where they took their girlfriends, I don't know. But they had some knowledge of this area.
And have you, in terms of Christine's family, I know that she was Welsh, and have you talked with Christine's family or friends? Is there anybody that you've spoke to?
Yeah, we still speak to her boyfriend at the time, as well as her brother. They're still in contact. They're still hoping for some closure to this, but I mean, it's been a long time now, and we're hoping to give them that closure.
And I think, as we were discussing about this case, obviously this is what you do for a living, is you're the lead detective for the Homicide Squad. And I know in my experiences dealing with, yourselves and FBI and RCMP and looking at different cases, serial killers, I think the one thing that jumps out at me in this is that there hasn't been any other offenses that they've given DNA for. Since 82, 83, these types of people are people that you would think are potentially, this is driven by drugs. This is driven by individuals who, have a tendency to sexual assault or even murder. This is something that's typical of a really heavy criminal, maybe not the brightest, but what's your thoughts on why they haven't been, how have these guys not been back in the spotlight in some shape or form?
It's mind-boggling, actually. I mean,
yeah,
you commit this offense and then you never commit another threshold offense that you're convicted of, where
That's
your
what I
DNA
mean.
is ordered.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's shocking. But you see from the cases that we've been doing, we have a lot of these where the offenders just, they don't pop back up. They don't commit a threshold offense. And I mean, at the time, the DNA wouldn't have been taken, right? So
Even if they did,
absolutely,
we may not know.
that's right. So I mean, it's more of a recent thing. They may have aged out on, the violent offenses, as people do as they get older.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But for whatever reason, these offenders, these murderers, are not committing offenses that get them onto our national data bank.
And that's the one thing that you do see is, I've heard of people taking breaks. You see a lot of the big serial killers, they take, breaks between a batch of murders. They'll take off 5 years, even a decade. You see that, but it's just hard to believe from 82 to now we're, 2021, there's been anything. So it leads you to believe maybe they perished, or maybe they had a family, maybe changed their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Left the area.
100%. And I mean, as I said, we're working on some scientific techniques right now. So we're hoping that we can provide some of those answers and we can close some of those open doors and get a little further ahead in this, because this is one that, I mean, you've looked through the case. It's a real head scratcher, to be honest with you. Because like we said, I mean, these guys don't seem like master criminals. They didn't cover their tracks very well. To be honest, they were lucky not to get caught. And we're still looking for them, and we want to find these guys.
Yeah, it's just a very odd case. People are taken off the streets around the world. That's unfortunately common, a lot more common than the general public knows. But what isn't common here is the fact that they've driven across the city to this specific destination. They've hid the body in a place that a seasoned criminal would not want to put a body where it's going to be discovered the next day, fresh with maybe clues, DNA. This body was visible. Tell me, how visible was this body from from anybody walking near it, from the bridge even? Was it above the water?
Oh yeah, it was very obvious. We had multiple callers calling in to report that they believed that there was a body in the river. So it wasn't hidden by any means. And I mean, just to throw the ID of someone that you just murdered out onto a public highway,
it's another strange one. Yeah,
it's they were taking no care. They were taking no care to cover their tracks. So it's just unfortunately we didn't get the traction at the time. And I mean, obviously DNA helps immensely, but they weren't covering their tracks at all.
Yeah, and it's strange to think. I mean, as we talked about earlier, the only other, this behavior is typical of a serial killer or a criminal that wants to be known, that wants the notoriety. They not necessarily want to be caught, but they want the police. They want to play that game. So if that's not the case, which because there has, they haven't reoffended and it's not a serial killer type position here, it just makes you believe they just did something maybe under the influence of drugs. They just weren't that bright. And it was kind of a crash and bang type scenario here where they just committed this crime and threw the wallet out and away they went.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who knows what occurred that night? Who knows if the intent wasn't to kill her at the time? They may have hit her too hard. We just don't know. They may have panicked when they did find out that she was deceased.
Let's talk about that. She did have an injury. So she was hit she had blunt force trauma. Tell me about where you think that transpired. Do you think that happened maybe when she was abducted off the street? Did this happen maybe at the house? Is there any information that?
Yeah, I mean, either are plausible, right? If it was one offender, he may have hit her over the head immediately when he tried to drag her into the vehicle. If it was two offenders, it probably happened later on, whether they sexually assaulted her and figured that they were going to dump her out in the woods and give her a little knock on the head so she was out cold and would wake up later and hit her too hard. We don't know. We don't know what happened there. Or did they set out with that intent to sexually assault and murder her?
Because if she was dumped into the water, you would think that, I'm pretty sure they knew that she was deceased at that time before they put her there.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you planned this event, you planned to murder someone, is this the ideal dumping spot? I would say no.
No, I would agree with that. No, and I think it just was, they wanted to get rid of her, out of there, whether their car or, whatever happened. I think obviously either she was deceased at the place they assaulted her, or maybe even at the actual crime scene or around. It's hard to say, but I think, what are we looking for here? What are we looking for? 2 or 3 potential individuals? We're looking for somebody to come forward. Ideally, what would you ask of the public?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for the name of the person that left their DNA from the sexual assault. That's a person that we can 100% put there. And we're just looking for someone to come forward with that name. If there was 2, 3, 4 individuals and their one friend was some sort of psychopath and sexually assaulted and murdered this woman while these guys were driving a van, just provide us with the name of your friend that you knew, or your friend at the time. Obviously, things have changed since then. Just give us a name of who did this. Obviously, obviously you've been living with us your whole life. Just provide us the name of your friend, because he's a murderer and we need to bring him to justice. Whether, if he's alive, we'll bring him and make him answer to this crime. If he's deceased, we'll give the family closure. But whoever did this shouldn't get away with it.
Yeah, and I think obviously somebody does know. There's, like you say, there was somebody that saw her abducted potentially. There was somebody that may have seen a suspicious car, van, whatever it was, near the area that her body was found. What do we know? What time she was dumped into the Rouge River?
We don't know. I mean, she was found in the morning. It could have been any time. It could have been almost immediately after she was taken. It could have been basically any time through the night. So we don't know what transpired in those hours.
It's just baffling how this all took place. In terms of what other clues was there anything else outside of the wallet? Is there anything else he had found?
There were some tire tracks in the area and such. We were able to match them up to a certain vehicle that had those tire tracks.
Okay.
But that turned into a bit of a red herring, a bit of a dead end. I mean, there were so many of the types of vehicles. It was a Toyota vehicle at the time.
Do we know what color, or is there any color?
We don't know any color or anything. We just know that it was they were Toyota tires that were used. They were on a certain Toyota vehicle. But we investigated that thoroughly and nothing came out of that really.
So I think right now the only thing that is left in hopes of solving this case is if someone comes forward.
Absolutely, and as we discussed, someone knows. In all these cases, the offenders at the very least spoken to someone, or someone was there with them at the time, and somebody knows who committed this offense.
And is there any right now? Is there any DNA that you're trying to push forward? Is there any extra technology that you're trying to use for this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, right now we have small quantities, and it's not of the best quality. But we've been working with the CFS as well as some private labs in being able to amplify that DNA so we can do biographic ancestry and we can come up with a root population of where this person was from. And if it fits our criteria, then go ahead with genetic genealogy and backtrack.
Okay. And so I think in closing, is there anything that you want to say to the general public in terms of any specifics that they can help bring forward, or even talk directly to one of the perpetrators that you feel was in that car at the time of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were there at the time, provide us the name of your friend that was doing this. Just let us have his name and we'll do the rest. We don't need to know who you are. Just provide us the information of who it was and we'll do the investigation. We'll bring this person to justice.
I think the last thing I wanted to also touch on is the victim's family here, or the former boyfriend. What is he saying to you?
Well, I mean, he gave a full statement at the time. He provided his DNA later on. He was very willing to help. We have another witness. The boyfriend had actually went home a little earlier. He'd got off at an earlier stop and walked to his home. Christine and another friend continued along the route using the TTC, and he was fully helpful in everything that we'd asked him.
Well, I think in closing, this is definitely a case that we'd love to bring closure to, and once again to the general public or the individuals that were there that night or morning. Please, give your name give a name anonymously to the Homicide Squad or Crime Stoppers, or if you feel even comfortable enough, reaching out to Obie Ax and just leave a name. We need to bring closure to the families, and these individuals need to be brought to justice. So, thank you very much, Steve, and that concludes our show for today.